Good morning, everybody. It's Ben Jones here from Batdorf and Bronson Coffee Roasters, hanging out on this Monday. I believe it's the 15th day of February, here in my home workshop. If the pop outside, we're in the middle of the tail end of a really fantastic little winter storm. Got a lot of snow out there, which you can't see because the camera doesn't point to the windows, but it's rather chilly. So I'm going to keep this one short today so I can get back in and do some work where it's warm. Alright, so, Batdorf from Bronson. Our roasting team is really good at taking the green raw coffee. It looks something like that, little tiny raw coffee seeds right here. They can take those and they can roast them in the big roaster machine to get them to look like the nice dark brown coffee beans we know, and we get all the good flavors on them. I happen to have right here a bag of the Las Brisas from Colombia. This is one of my favorite coffees. Right now I just happen to really love coffee out of South Colombia. Then I also have our Ethiopia Guji, the Shakiso, and this is also a delicious coffee, but it's the kind of delicious coffee that doesn't hit all my preferences. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just it's not the coffee I want. And the big reason here is that this Colombian coffee, this is what we call a washed coffee. So a little bit of kind of a coffee sourcing 101. Washed coffee means after the fruit was picked off the tree that has the coffee seed in it, the fruit was essentially removed from that seed as quickly as possible, and then that was further soaked in some water to get the last little bits of the little bit of coffee fruit clinging to it, to get that off of there. And that gives us a very, what we call a clean flavor. That does not imply a dirty flavor, and washed also, of course, doesn't imply unwashed in a dirty sense. Anyway, so washed coffees, you're going to taste typically more the origin, the terroir of where it came from, the genetic factors of the coffee itself, so the variety of the coffee, whether it's a Typica or a Bourbon or the many others. Whereas with a natural coffee, this is a coffee that after the fruit is plucked with the seed inside, the seed stays inside the fruit, letting the fruit dry, and that drying of the fruit imparts a lot of the fruity flavor into the seed, so you get a little sweeter cup with a lot more of a fruity tone. And the fruit can vary from blueberries, raspberries, to sort of a more of like a raisin or a winey kind of a port tone. So if we have washed on one side, natural on the other, there are then also, of course, everything in between, different degrees of the fruit being left on. All right, so with that, the Ethiopia Guji, a lot of coffees out of Ethiopia classically are natural processed because access to water in the very arid desert parts of Ethiopia where the coffee grows, you're not going to use a lot of extra water to wash fruit off, so you take advantage of the sun and you let that fruit dry on the seed and you get a very fruity coffee. Very classic Ethiopian or Yemeni profile. Whereas in Colombia, Costa Rica, all up and down Central and South America, water is a lot more plentiful, so it's not as big a deal to wash the coffees, get that fruit off of there. Anyway, so I tend to like this, but every now and again, I want something with a little more fruit tone. But this is a little too overpowering for me. I think of this, if you're making a sundae, if you really like vanilla ice cream, and you want to have like a hot fudge sundae, you take vanilla ice cream, a little bit of hot fudge, sprinkle it on there. But most people, hopefully, we're not going to be in the habit of just eating a jar of hot fudge. It's a topping to enhance the vanilla. That's how I feel personally about naturals. I have a lot of friends, and I know a lot of people who love drinking these straight. And if you do, that's awesome. For me, they're a little too overpowering. But I do want to benefit from that. So here's what I'm going to do. I have my scale down here. I'm going to see if I can turn this down a little bit. Get you all in on this. All right. So my normal cup of coffee, my standard diner mug, I am doing a dose of, there we go, y'all can see that now. I typically do a dose of 19 grams, and that gets me just what I need for my standard diner mug of coffee. I definitely want this base flavor of the Colombia. I want the nice cocoa notes that are in there. I want that very kind of, you might call it generic and standard coffee flavor. But I definitely want this to be the primary flavor that I'm getting. So of my 19 grams, I'm gonna go and put 12 grams of the Colombia Las Brisas. And then some basic simple math. I just want to bring this up to 19, so I'm just gonna add about 7 grams of this Ethiopia Guji Shakiso. And this is gonna give me roughly 1/3 of the natural coffee. And that's gonna just be, like I said, the tiny bit of hot fudge on my sundae. And that'll give me just what I need, yeah, to kind of liven up, just to kind of mix up that Colombia a little bit, give it a little something extra special. So now I'm going to take my blended coffees, and we'll just put them in here. Not going to give it a grinder now because it's pretty loud. Anyway, so that's really all you got to do at home to blend. It takes a little more specialized equipment to roast. I do have a little popcorn popper back there. That's what this little red guy is. So I can roast up some coffee at home. But yeah, when you're playing with our single origins, definitely, yeah, play around a little bit with it. Toss in a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I also have some of the Kenya and Darwini. And I did this one yesterday with the Colombia. And it was nice. It adds just a little bit of a kind of an apricot sort of little nectarine apricot tone to it. It was pretty nice. Brings out some of the florality as well. So here's what's something that little side note that I think is essential to understand. Efficiency wise, the most efficient way to roast blends would be to take all the green coffee in their component quantities, mix it together, toss that in the roaster, and then roast it. But efficiency isn't always as delicious, especially when you're working on a little more artisanal level. So at Batter from Bronson, all of our coffees, when we do blends, so for example, our Dancing Goats is made up typically of 4 different coffees. We take each of those coffees in the green form. Those are roasted specifically on their own. And then once all 4 coffees have been roasted individually, we'll then go back, mix them in their component forms to create that recipe that we're looking for. The reason we do that is if you have a coffee out of Brazil, it's going to roast incredibly different from a coffee out of Ethiopia, let's just say. So if Dancing Goats, depending on what we're putting into it, if it was the Ethiopia Guji right here, those beans are super small, they're incredibly dense, they react very differently to heat, they take a different amount of time to roast, and they need a different roast treatment from the Brazil, which tends to be a little bit less dense. So if we happen to mix all the green together, roasted it, it would not taste as good as it does when we roast them individually. So since you can buy bags of coffee already roasted, you can then take it and you can be like, oh, this is a natural processed coffee, it's gonna be fruity, catch the tasty notes on here, toss in, kind of do an equal 50-50, half and half of each, kind of 20-30%. Play around with it. Mix 2 coffees together, mix 3 coffees together. The key is to play. Speaking of playing, it's time for me to make some coffee. So I'm going to grind this up and I'm going to pour some hot water over the ground little bits and then make sure that passes through a filter. Thanks for joining. See you next time.